Good morning. Before I call the meeting to order, a couple of housekeeping items, if I could. If you have a cell phone, if you'd please silence it at this time. And if you wish to address the trust at any time, if you would sign outside the door a sheet and turn it in, we'll call on you at the appropriate time. There will also be a time for you to speak at the end of our session this morning. That being said, let's call to order the August 22nd, 2019 meeting of the Oklahoma City Airport Trust. And our first item of business is to approve the minutes of the July 25th, 2019 Oklahoma City Airport Trust.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, please cast your votes. And is approved. Next up, Director's Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. I do have a couple of comments related to air service. The first one is, and I haven't talked about our boarding passenger numbers in a few months, but through January through July of this year, we're 3.2% higher than the same time period last year. So traffic is still going very well, and remember, this is on the heels of a calendar year record of 2017 and 2018, even breaking that record. So things are going pretty good. I do have a couple of comments with regard to the recent announcement that Southwest Airlines came out last week and talked about some air service changes that are going to start in January of 2020. One of the good news piece of this is that they started Nashville some time ago with seasonal service only going one day a week to Nashville. But Oklahoma City has responded really well to that market, and now they have committed to doing 6 days a week to Nashville, which presents a huge opportunity for connections with Southwest and their network up and down the East Coast and even beyond. One of the things that was surprising and, of course, disappointing was Southwest is faced with a lot of challenges right now for a variety of reasons, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But they are discontinuing the nonstop flights from Oklahoma City to Dallas Love Field, as they are in many markets across the country. One of the things we need to consider is that only 18% of the passenger loads on average that were on an airplane going to Dallas Love were actually terminating in Dallas. 82% of that load factor is actually connecting in Dallas, going on to other cities. So the issue really is that the load factors for Oklahoma City passengers going to Dallas Love Field overall was about 75%. That's the lowest load factor that they have for any market going into Love Field, and on average about 10% lower. Very hard for an airline to sustain that type of model, and when you consider the other challenges that they have where they're capacity constrained at Love Field, they can only have about 195 daily flights, and they need to serve that metroplex as much as possible. The other thing is that the MAX 8, the 737 MAX 8 grounding has really impacted Southwest more than any other carrier. They had more in their fleet when the grounding occurred. I think everybody thought that by now that would have all been resolved. It has not. So they've had to make some very difficult decisions. One of the other good things that Southwest is doing as a result of the termination of the service to Dallas is that they recognize that connection opportunities were important to Oklahoma City, and so they're adding a flight to Houston and adding a flight to Phoenix. So with Nashville, Houston, and Phoenix, there's going to be many more opportunities for our connecting passengers in our community than we had previously in Dallas, so that's good. Southwest has been a fantastic partner. They've been a great believer in our market. They still believe in our market. So I don't want to bash them about, terminating the service to Dallas. They serve 9 markets out of Oklahoma City, which is more than any other carrier. And don't forget, they stepped up and did Reagan National. So they're just faced with some very difficult business decisions. And when you only have 18% of the passengers from Oklahoma City that are terminating in Dallas, it's very hard for an airline to justify that kind of service to keep that going. We talk to all of our airlines routinely, and we will continue to have dialogue with Southwest. And hopefully if the MAX 8 ever gets over with, then maybe we'll be able to have other opportunities to Love Field. Thank you.
Mark, I just have a comment that I used to say that when you die, no matter what your ultimate destination is, you're going to go through Dallas.
Don't give up your day job.
There's a flip side to this, and that is we have lots more nonstop flights, direct flights to destinations all over the country than we used to have. And so the Dallas connection is not nearly as vital as it used to be, and that's reflected in the numbers.
Yes, sir. And we saw the same thing with Midway. We saw the same thing with St. Louis, with Dallas, as much as they have diversed their market out of Oklahoma City. And the Ryder Amendment, as you know, settled some years ago. And so when that sunset, that really opens up the skies for Southwest. And we were a benefactor of that because they were able to have strong load factors out of Oklahoma City going to these other markets. And when you do that, then not everybody has to go to Dallas like we did 15 years ago. And so it's just an evolution of the air service. And we'll talk more about air service on the agenda. Karen will have a presentation a little bit later. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other comments or questions on the director's report? Seeing none, next up on our agenda is Will Rogers World Airport.
So for item A, we want to accept the completed project for the tunnel repairs project at Mike Maroney Aeronautical Center with ResTech Incorporated. Item B is accepting the fuel facility generator and automatic transfer switch project with Jim Cooley Construction, LLC. Item C is approving amendment number 1 to our contract with CGC, LLC. This is for the parking lot number 1 rehabilitation project with our pavement increase of $135,000. D is approving amendment number 1 to our contract with ADG. This is to replace several elevators in numerous buildings at Mike Maroney Aeronautical Center. It's an increase of $34,831.05. Item E is approving change order 5 to our contract with Timberlake Construction Company, Incorporated. This is for the terminal renovation and expansion project. Increase of $3,907.70. Item F is approving and ratifying the issuance of addendum number 1. This is for the Mike Maroney project for the Hangar 8 and Hangar 8 and Hangar 9 electrical upgrades project. Received the bids, opened on July 24th, and awarding the contract to Libra Electric Company for $2,921,697, approving the contract and bonds. Item G is approving and ratifying the issuance of addendum number 1. This is associated with the terminal renovation project. It's the bid we put out for the passenger boarding bridges. Received the recommendation regarding the bids that were opened on July 31st. We're also adopting a resolution rejecting the bid of John Bean Technologies Corporation and awarding the contract to ThyssenKrupp Airport Systems for $4,312,848.29, approving contract and bonds. Item H is approving the plans and project manuals submitted by Robeson and Associates Architects. This is for the Southfield Maintenance Facility Roof Replacement Project. We're advertising bids to be open on September 25th. Item I is approving the plans and project manuals submitted by Kimley Horn and Associates. This is for the new cell phone waiting lot project and authorizing the bids to be open on September 25th. Item J is relating to Air Service Marketing and Incentive Program. This is adopting the resolution amending our program for new airlines and new nonstop destinations. And before I go on, I'd like Karen Carney to come up. She has a brief presentation on the program and its history and successes and some of the changes. Karen, thanks for coming.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, trustees and staff. So, yes, in the last 18 months, we've had quite a bit of activity on relating to air service in Oklahoma City. So we thought that was an opportunity to take a look at our incentive program, see if there were some improvements that we could make. Before I get into too much of what those improvements are that we're recommending today, I kind of want to remind some of the reasons why we do have an incentive program. Because the airlines have competition amongst themselves, they have increased operating costs, so they are constantly looking at the bottom line. They're scrutinizing their profit margins, and they're evaluating the viability and profitability of routes and city pairs. And I think sometimes we forget that a route has to work on both ends, not just in Oklahoma City. Additionally, we still have some travelers that will drive to neighboring cities such as Dallas or to Tulsa to catch a nonstop flight or possibly get a better airfare. And lastly, there's a lot of issues such as resources. I mean, airlines only have so many aircraft that they can use and to accommodate routes. Timing, how do you work all that scheduling to make it work, and outside forces that they can't control. And as Mark was talking about the grounding of the MAX 8, that's a good example of how an impact that might have on scheduling with airlines. Additionally, just the capacity in airports, stage lengths, all of these things create heightened competition amongst airports, particularly airports our size. So while we know the incentive program is not going to make the decision for the airline, when they're looking at a lot of different cities, we know that the incentive program can help tip the scales. So that is one of the reasons that we have it. We want to continue to attract new air carriers. We want to continue to grow our air service with more nonstop flights because our goal is to make it better for our traveling public, for our business, and help grow the economy in the community. We want to increase the traveling public at our airport because obviously that results in increased revenues for the airport. And so we also want to offer a program that combines some marketing incentives to help create awareness and some operational credits that also help offset the cost of starting new service. And we want to make it sure that it's beneficial not only for the airline, but for the trust and for the community. We've had our program in place since 2002, and I'm not going to go through the whole list, but you can see some of the benefits that we've had with incentivizing some of our service here in Oklahoma City. It's been an integral part of our success. It's helped bring us new air carriers, ExpressJet, Alaska, Frontier, and yes, I'll say it, Via. But there's also a side benefit to starting new service, and that is the stimulation of the markets. Oftentimes, when a new route begins, we see the passengers' traffic grow in those markets, and then ultimately other air carriers come to help support that market with additional service. Examples of that would be Orlando, DCA, Los Angeles, and Denver is another good example of that. So here you can see our route map. It's pretty extensive, and we're really proud of it and where we've come over the last decade. We still have some targeted markets, some targeted destinations that we would like to see. Boston is one of them. We would certainly love to see the 2 additional airports in the New York area, LaGuardia and JFK. We'd like to see some additional capacity in southern Florida, Fort Lauderdale. And then as our business continues to grow in the community, we would anticipate that we would have some more point-to-point services that will help grow those businesses. So our first goal, of course, is to get a carrier to begin service in Oklahoma City, but then our second goal is to assist them in trying to make that route successful. But I always like to remind people that there is no guaranteed success when we do start a new route. And while the majority of our incentivized markets have been very successful, we have had a few setbacks in some of the service incentives. Cleveland, that's an example. We incentivized Continental Airlines for Cleveland, and it was actually doing pretty well, but then they merged with United Airlines. United pulled down that Cleveland hub, and Oklahoma City was not the only city that was impacted by loss of service there. ExpressJet, you may recall, is actually, it still is a regional carrier, but back in 2007, it started providing commercial service to point-to-point markets, smaller markets. And in Oklahoma City, they had five cities that they were serving. And they were, at the time, flying 50-seat passenger jets, which I suppose you could kind of say they were kind of the gas guzzlers of the jet fleet at that time. So they actually were a casualty of the high fuel prices and the recession in 2007, 2008. More recently, we incentivized Frontier to San Diego. And that really, the loss of that service was really just due to the fact that they couldn't get passengers. They couldn't fill the plane. It wasn't being utilized. And the rarer failure, this really has not really happened, is more recently with Via Air. And there were a lot of different issues with that airline, many operational issues that ultimately resulted in them pulling service. So the reason I mention these things is that we do occasionally have some loss of service that we have incentivized, but we can't guarantee it. Sometimes it's beyond our control, beyond the airline's control. But we learn from those things. And so as we move forward with updating our plan, we've set some new goals in this update. One is we want to optimize our marketing dollars. We want to make sure that it's being spent the best way that it can be spent. We also want to give some flexibility to the airlines in actually implementing their marketing plans, and we want to try to include some safeguards for the trust. We have two types of incentives, marketing and operational. Those haven't changed. That's what we've had for a long time. But here are the key changes that we're proposing in the plan. The first is we'd like to add a small incentive for seasonal service. We're seeing a lot of airlines, not just low-fare carriers, but mainline carriers as well, implementing seasonal service. And the reason they're doing that is it gives them the ability to maximize their fleet utilization. And you'll notice that in the chart, we would only give that incentive in the first year, which takes me to the second change that we're making in the plan, which is to split the expenditures over a 2-year period. Instead of upfronting all the money right away, we would probably take 2/3 of it in the first year when they really need to gain the recognition, generate ridership, and then the next year kind of re-support that service with the remaining incentive dollars. So this is a good thing for the airline, but it's also good for us because if they should reduce service or take the service out of the market, we're not obligated to pay those remaining dollars in the second year. The third thing that we wanted to do is to give the airlines a little more, allow them to implement some of their marketing programs. They all have advertising agencies. There are in-house agencies. They're obviously very in tune with their strategies in promoting their airline, and they particularly know the traveler and their target audience for a particular destination. So they would have the ability to actually implement the program, and then the trust would reimburse them for that advertising. How that would work, they would submit a plan to us for approval before they could do anything. They would have to submit all of their creative to us for approval so that we can ensure that they are actually promoting our market. And then before they would receive any reimbursement, they would have to submit very detailed documentation of how those dollars were spent. The FAA does allow this as long as that you can document that none of the reimbursing funds are going to the operating costs of the airline. And currently there are several airports that are doing this. So it's kind of an acceptable way. Again, it kind of takes some of as far as we're concerned, is payment. If they do not follow through, if they do not provide proper documentation, then we do not reimburse them for what they've spent the dollars on. And then the last item is that this actually I put under marketing, but it actually applies to both the operational, is that we've included language in the program that if they do not fulfill their obligation or if they become delinquent on their financial obligations, we may ask them to repay us for any incentives that they did receive. On the operational side of it, really the amounts have not changed. What we are asking for, though, is to the landing fee rebate currently goes into effect after 1 year of operation. As I mentioned, the upfront costs of starting a route are what are important to the airline, so we are proposing that we move that to start after 6 months of operation. It still would be paid for performance, so after six months you would get a rebate for month 1, 7 months for month 2, etc. And again, if they should suspend service or pull the service, we would not, the incentive becomes null. And then lastly, we did delete a landing fee incentive to upgauge aircraft to certain cities, because at this time we really don't have any targeted cities where we are looking to add larger aircraft. That could potentially come back someday, but at least right now we don't think that that's something we need in the plan. So those are the changes that we're proposing in the update. Any questions?
Karen, I don't know if this question is for you or possibly Mark, but would it require a substantial increase in costs if we were to ever offer direct flights, say, to Canada or Mexico, international flights? Is the Oklahoma City Airport capable of offering those types of flights?
Well, some of that is dependent upon getting a U.S. Customs facility.
Right.
Although we could, in Canada, we could pre-clear, but there could be some additional costs. I don't think it would be significant cost to us unless we were somehow having to offset costs for the customs facility. The international flight would have to support the costs of operating the customs facilities, and there have been cases where airports have to actually fill in the deficit. Okay, thank you all.
Very good. Karen does a fabulous job managing our air service development and overall the marketing program at the airport, and great relationship with all the airlines locally, as well as all of the route planners that are with their corporate headquarters. And she attends numerous conferences a year. She's like the gnat in front of their face, so they always know about Oklahoma City because she's always talking to stuff. So we appreciate that. The last item under Will Rogers is item K, which is adopting the resolution authorizing the purchase of construction testing services. This is for our project, which will start the next month or so, to rehabilitate the terminal access roadway. It's using a city contract with Roca Engineering Incorporated for $30,226.75. With all of that, we'd like approval for the items under Will Rogers, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Director. You've heard the items under Will Rogers. We have a motion to approve. In a second, any comments or questions? Seeing none, please cast your votes. And they are approved. Lease and other agreements.
Under Wiley Post is next. We'd like approval for item A, which is the acceptance of our project where we demolished Hangar 5 with Midwest Wrecking at Wiley Post Airport. Item B is approving and ratifying the issuance of addendum number 1 and also approving change order 1 to our contract with Libra Electric Company. They're doing additional infrastructure repairs and improvements at Wiley Post. It's a decrease of $2,919.17. Item C is adopting the resolution authorizing environmental abatement services for building materials. This is from the former Gulfstream facility leasehold. Utilizing Intercon city contract, it's an amount of estimated $394,424.24. Item D is approving the plans and project manual submitted by Frankfurt Short Bruza for the mechanical and plumbing systems replacement project, authorizing advertisement for bids to be opened on September 25th. Those are the only items under Wiley Post, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for correcting that for me, Mr. Mayor. You've heard the items under Wiley Post. What's the desires of the trustees?
Mr. Chairman, it's just that Wiley Post is very dear to me because I fly in and out of there all the time. So
You have enlightened self-interest.
I do move approval.
Motion to approve. Second. And a second. Any comments or questions? Please cast your votes. And Wiley Post items are approved. Next, General.
The only thing I have